My name is Talbert Keller. I was 68 years old when I found myself sitting in a courtroom, trying to prove that I was not dangerous to my own two grandchildren. I never imagined my life would come to that. My daughter-in-law stood before the judge, handed over an audio recording, and claimed it proved I was no longer fit to be near Lily and Noah. The entire room looked at me as though I were already defeated, as though I were an old man they should pity rather than someone worth hearing. My son was gone, and those two children were the only part of him I had left. I sat at the defense table with my carpenter's hands resting on my knees, while my own voice came through a small courtroom speaker. My words had been cut apart, rearranged, and stitched together until I sounded like someone I did not recognize. But Marissa had made one mistake. She stopped the recording exactly where she wanted the judge to stop listening. She had never considered what would happen if someone played the final few minutes. To understand how I reached that courtroom, I have to go back 2 years, to the morning my phone rang before dawn. A phone ringing at 4 in the morning rarely brings good news. I knew that before I even answered. My wife Ruth had been gone for 4 years by then, so I was alone in the house. The ringing seemed to fill every empty room at once. When I picked up, a foreman from a construction site downtown was on the other end. He kept saying my son's name. Daniel. There had been a fall. Part of the scaffolding had given way. They were doing everything they could. I do not remember getting dressed. I remember the cold steering wheel beneath my hands. I remember driving through dark streets while praying to a God I had barely spoken to since Ruth's funeral. I remember telling myself that Daniel was strong, that he had survived difficult things before, and that I only needed to reach the hospital. By the time I arrived, the phrase, doing everything they could, had already become something people said when there was nothing left to do. A young doctor met me in a hallway that smelled of bleach. He spoke gently and carefully, but I understood before he finished. My boy had not made it. Daniel was 34 years old. He had a wife, 2 children, a career, plans, and more life ahead of him than behind him. Then, in the span of one morning, all of it was gone. Marissa was in the waiting room. She was folded over her knees, shaking so hard that someone had placed a blanket around her shoulders. When she saw me, she broke apart all over again. I held her. I held my son's wife, while a nurse tried to keep Lily and Noah in another room. Through the wall, I could hear Lily crying. Somewhere inside that noise, I made a promise. I did not say it aloud. I made it to Daniel, wherever he had gone. I promised I would watch over his children. Whatever it took and however long it lasted, I would make sure they knew they still had family. I meant every word. I drove home after sunrise. Gray lights spread across the fields while I sat in my truck in the driveway, unable to make my legs move. I did not know then that the promise I had made in that hospital hallway would become the same promise people later used to call me dangerous. Grief never really leaves. You simply learn to build a life around it, the way a tree grows around a nail. For me, that new life became Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those were my days with Lily and Noah. I picked them up after school and brought them to my house. Lily was 7 then, full of questions, missing hair ties, and scraped knees. Noah was 4, quiet and watchful, with a habit of sucking his thumb when he was tired. He looked so much like Daniel at that age that sometimes I had to turn away for a moment before speaking. We made grilled cheese sandwiches and somehow managed to cover half the kitchen in crumbs and butter. My workshop became their favorite place. I had worked as a carpenter most of my life, and I learned long ago that children love being trusted with something real. I showed Noah how to hold a hammer correctly. I let Lily sand pieces of pine until her arms became tired. "Grandpa, you're not listening," she would say. My hearing was not what it used to be. My left ear was almost gone, and certain voices disappeared if people stood on the wrong side of me. Lily learned to tap my right shoulder before speaking. She turned it into a game. She would lean toward my good ear, whisper the beginning of a secret, and then shout the punchline. She called herself my little translator. I built things for both children. I made Noah a small step stool so he could reach the bathroom sink. For Lily, I started a wooden keepsake box. I carved her name across the lid. Le, ye. 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 Each letter had to be clean. I sanded the edges by hand because I wanted it perfect. I was not finished with it yet, but every time she visited, she asked whether she could see it. Those children were the last living pieces of Daniel I could hold. I saw him in the way Noah narrowed his eyes when he concentrated. I heard him in Lily's laugh. Marissa allowed me to keep my Tuesdays and Thursdays. We were never especially close, but we treated each other kindly. I brought groceries when I knew money was tight. I repaired her gutters. I fixed a cabinet door and replaced a broken porch step. When the children were sick, I offered to help. I believed we were building something that would last. Then, the following spring, Marissa met a man named Roar. He entered our lives the way weather changes. At first, there was only one cloud, so small that no one paid attention. Then one day, I looked up and realized the entire sky had changed. The first signs seemed harmless. One Tuesday was canceled. "The kids have something," Marissa told me. Then a Thursday disappeared. Noah's tired. I understood. Marissa was still young. She had become a widow at 32. She deserved companionship and a chance to rebuild her life. I told myself to be patient and not become the kind of father-in-law who resented every new person. But the cancellations continued. 2 weeks would pass without me seeing Lily or Noah. Then 3. When I did visit, Roar was usually there, standing in the kitchen as though the house belonged to him. He watched me with a smile that never reached his eyes. I only met him 3 or 4 times, but that was enough to understand how he saw me. He spoke over me. When I could not hear something and asked him to repeat it, he waved one hand and said, "Never mind." Then he continued speaking to Marissa, as though I were not in the room. I became furniture that happened to take up space. Eventually, I learned that Roar lived 2 states away. He wanted Marissa and the children to move there. One Thursday, I managed to speak with Lily on the phone for exactly 1 minute. Her voice was quiet and careful, the way children speak when they know they are sharing something adults told them to hide. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Mom says we're moving far away." My chest tightened. "Moving where, honey?" "I'm not supposed to." The call ended. It had not dropped. Someone had taken the phone and ended it. I stood alone in my kitchen listening to the empty tone. For a moment, it felt as though the floor had shifted beneath my feet. Far away, 2 states away, a place where Tuesdays and Thursdays could no longer reach. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself Marissa would never completely separate me from Daniel's children. 3 days later, standing on her porch, I learned exactly how wrong I was. That Saturday, I drove to her house with Lily's wooden box sitting on the passenger seat. I had finished it the night before. I had sanded the lid until it shone, and polished the carved letters until every edge felt smooth. My plan was simple. I would give Lily the box and ask Marissa to speak with me privately. We would sit down like adults and figure out what was happening. My key did not work. I stood at the front door, turning it in the lock and wondering whether I had picked up the wrong key. I had not. The lock was new. The brass was still bright. I knocked. Marissa opened the door only halfway. She positioned herself in the opening so I could not see inside. Behind her, I heard the television. Beneath the television, I heard Noah's voice. "Tal," she said. "Not Dad anymore. Only Tal." "Are the kids here?" I asked. "I brought something for Lily." "This isn't a good time." I raised the box. "It will only take a minute." She looked at the box, then at me. Something in her expression closed, like a shop locking its doors at night. "I've been thinking," she said. "I believe the children need a fresh start. A clean one." Her voice was gentle. That made it worse. "I don't want to make this difficult," she continued, "but I'm their mother. Marissa, they're Daniel's children too. I'm the only family Daniel has left." "I know," she said. "I'm sorry." Then she closed the door. There was no shouting, no argument, only a soft click. I drove home with Lily's box still sitting beside me. That night, I sat alone in my workshop beneath a single bare bulb. I turned the box over in my hands and ran my thumb across the carved letters. Le. I called Lily's phone later. My number had been blocked. I tried Marissa. Blocked there too. For 2 years, I had kept a promise to my son. Now I could not even reach his children to tell them goodbye. I did not sleep. Instead, I started reading. I was not a computer man. I typed with 2 fingers on an old desktop Ruth had bought years earlier. But during that week, I taught myself enough to discover 2 difficult truths. The first was that grandparents had fewer legal rights than most people believed. I found court decisions explaining that the law strongly favored a parent's choices. A parent considered fit had broad authority to decide who could see the children, including grandparents. The second truth was harder. To succeed, I would need to show that completely removing me from Lily and Noah's lives was genuinely harming them. The legal websites called it clear and convincing evidence. That sounded like an impossibly high wall for an old carpenter typing with 2 fingers. Eventually, I found a legal aid office 1 town away. They accepted clients who could not afford expensive representation, which described me perfectly. That was where I met Gwen Alcott. She was around 40, sharp as a chisel, direct, and uninterested in wasting words. I liked her immediately. She listened while I told the entire story. She sat across from me at a metal desk and filled page after page with notes. "I won't mislead you, Mr. Keller," she said. "Courts begin by respecting the mother's decisions. You will be climbing uphill from the beginning." "I only want to see them," I answered. "I promised my son." Something in her expression softened. She placed her pen on the desk. "All right," she said. "Then we file for visitation. We show the court that you had a real, beneficial bond with those children for 2 years." For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Then Gwen leaned back and folded her hands. "But I have to ask something," she said. "I need you to be completely honest with me." She looked directly into my eyes. "Does Marissa have any reason at all to tell a judge that you are unsafe around those children?" I opened my mouth to say no. Then I stopped. The truth was that certain moments could be twisted. I understood that the instant Gwen asked. There was one situation, I admitted. The previous summer, Noah had been buckled into my truck in the driveway. He had fallen asleep. I stepped onto the porch to retrieve his inhaler. I was gone only a moment. Noah woke, unfastened himself, opened the door, and started running across the driveway just as a delivery truck was backing toward the house. My throat tightened while I explained it. I shouted, I told Gwen. Loud. I ran and grabbed him. It frightened both of us. She wrote something down. "Anything else?" "My hearing," I said. "The left side is bad. Sometimes the children have to repeat themselves." Heat rose into my face. I'm not confused, I added. I simply don't hear everything the first time. Gwen nodded and continued writing. How were things with Marissa shortly before she changed the locks? I thought about it. Then, a cold feeling slowly moved up my spine. She started visiting more often, I said. Gwen looked up. That seems unusual if she was reducing your time with the children. It was. She would arrive when I had them. Sometimes she placed her phone face down on the kitchen table and left it there. Then she picked it up when she left. Gwen stopped writing. Until that moment, I had not put the pieces together. I had been too busy missing the children to become suspicious. You think she recorded me? I asked. It was not really a question. Gwen did not answer immediately. That silence was enough. If she did, Gwen finally said, then she was building something, and she was doing it patiently. I sat in that small office feeling foolish. All those afternoons, all those grilled cheese sandwiches, all those ordinary conversations, and a phone lying face down on my table, quietly collecting everything. What could she possibly use? I asked. 3 weeks later, the answer arrived in the mail. A thick envelope contained a court summons, but it was not connected to the visitation case Gwen and I planned to file. It was Marissa's case. She had acted first. She was not waiting for me to request visitation. She had decided to define the entire argument before I ever entered the courtroom. Marissa asked the court to formally declare me unfit to spend time with Lily and Noah, whether supervised or unsupervised. She also requested permission to move both children 2 states away to live near Roar. The petition described me in cold legal language: increasingly impaired, declining faculties, unsafe judgment, a danger to the children. It accused me of leaving a young child unattended in a vehicle. It claimed that I shouted at the children and frightened them. I read the papers 3 times at my kitchen table before the words stopped moving across the page. Impaired, declining, dangerous. I placed the documents down and stared at my hands. Those hands had built Daniel's nursery before he was born. Those hands had taught Daniel to ride a bicycle. Those hands had shown Noah how to hold a hammer. I called Gwen. She came to my house that evening and read the entire filing at my kitchen table. She's smart, Gwen said quietly. She moved first. Now you are not the grandfather asking for time with his grandchildren. You are the man defending himself from an accusation that he is unsafe. None of it is true. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I may be older. I may move more slowly, but I have never allowed those children to come to harm. Gwen studied me for a long moment. I believe you, she said. But belief is not evidence, and Marissa is not relying on belief. She pointed to a line near the end of the petition. She claims she has proof. Proof of what? Audio recordings. There it was. The phone face down on my kitchen table. 2 months of ordinary afternoons. When is the hearing? I asked. 3 weeks, Gwen answered. Family court. Clean your best suit, Mr. Keller, and prepare yourself. You may have to listen to your own voice being used against you. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. Eventually, I took out the old family photo albums. One picture held my attention longer than the others. Daniel was 9 years old. He stood in my workshop holding a birdhouse we had built together. He was grinning with one front tooth missing. He had sanded that birdhouse so aggressively that he wore a hole through the back. I never repaired it. I found the wedding photographs too. Marissa wore white and laughed in nearly every picture. Daniel looked at her as though she had placed every star in the sky. There were few photographs from the funeral, but I remembered that day clearly enough. At the graveside, Marissa held tightly to my arm. I don't know how to do this without him, she sobbed. I told her she was not alone. I promised she would never be alone. Sitting in the dark, I tried to understand how that woman had become the person who changed the locks, placed a recording phone inside my home, and asked a judge to remove me from my grandchildren's lives. Grief changes people. I understood that better than most. It creates an empty space inside you, and sometimes fear moves into that space. I did not hate Marissa. I could not. She carried the same loss I carried. She was simply carrying it differently. But I made another promise that night. No matter what she said about me in court, no matter how my words were rearranged, and no matter how the people in that room looked at me, I would not shout. I would not become the man described in her petition. I would face it the way Daniel would have expected me to. My back straight, my voice calm, my anger controlled. I would let the truth stand where I could not. The next morning, I wore Daniel's tie. The family courthouse stood in a low brick building near the town square. Inside, everything smelled of paper, old wood, floor wax, and the warm dust produced by fluorescent lights. I had never entered a courtroom before. It was smaller than the ones on television. A raised bench stood at the front. 2 tables faced it. Several rows of hard wooden benches sat behind a low divider. Judge Harmon appeared to be around 60. She had silver hair, reading glasses resting low on her nose, and eyes that seemed to notice everything. A court reporter sat to one side with her fingers ready above the keys. Several people occupied the back benches while waiting for their own cases. Near the final row, a young man held a notebook. The local newspaper, Gwen whispered. Family proceedings were often private, but the request to move the children out of state had attracted attention. Marissa was already seated at the opposite table. She wore a simple gray dress with no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back. She looked exactly like a grieving widow doing her best under impossible circumstances. I had to give her credit. She understood how to present herself. Her attorney looked completely different. His suit was sharp. His watch looked expensive, He carried himself like a man who charged by the quarter hour and never forgot to bill for one. I sat beside Gwen. I placed both hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. Marissa did not look at me. Not once. Judge Harmon called the case and moved through the preliminary details in a calm, patient voice. Then she turned toward Marissa's attorney. You indicated that you have evidence to present. The attorney stood and buttoned his jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. We have several audio recordings. I believe the court will find them informative. He reached into his briefcase. Beside me, Gwen became completely still. My entire life seemed to narrow around the small black speaker on the clerk's desk. Before playing the audio, Marissa testified. Her attorney guided her gently through each question. She dabbed at her eyes at the correct moments. Talbert isn't the man he used to be, she said. Her voice trembled. Since Daniel passed, he's been slipping. He forgets things. He becomes confused. Can you provide an example? Her attorney asked. He left Noah alone in a truck. My little boy got out and ran into the path of a moving vehicle. Someone behind me gasped. He nearly cost my son his life. That was not what happened. But Marissa spoke so softly and sadly that I watched Judge Harmon pause above her notes. There's more, Marissa continued. He shouts. He loses his temper around the children. I've heard it myself. Eventually, I became afraid to leave them with him. She pressed a tissue to her mouth. I care about him. I do. He is Daniel's father. But I cannot gamble with my children's safety. Then, for the first time, she turned toward me. Her eyes were wet but steady. I'm sorry, Tal, she said. I have to put them first. The room believed her. I could feel it. The young reporter scribbled rapidly. A woman on one of the back benches shook her head while looking at me. Even the court reporter glanced in my direction with something that resembled pity. I sat beneath those eyes, wearing Daniel's tie, my carpenter's hands folded together. I said nothing. Anything I said in anger would make me resemble the exact person Marissa had described. Beneath the table, Gwen pressed one hand against my forearm. Steady. Wait. Marissa's attorney allowed the silence to remain for several seconds. Then he turned toward the clerk. With the court's permission, we would like to play the first recording. Judge Harmon nodded. Marissa reached toward the device and pressed a button. My own voice filled the courtroom. There is something deeply unsettling about hearing your voice used against you. The speaker crackled. I heard sounds from my kitchen. A chair moved across the floor. Then I heard myself, but it was not truly me. Pieces from different afternoons had been cut apart and joined together. The transitions were hidden well enough that most people would never notice. Enough, Noah. My voice sounded harsh. Get back here. Without context, it sounded like anger. It sounded like an older man losing control while frightening a little boy. I remembered that day immediately. Noah had run toward the driveway while a delivery truck backed toward him. I shouted because my voice was the only thing fast enough to reach him. But the recording did not include the truck. It did not include the moment afterward when I dropped to my knees, held Noah, and checked every part of him. It did not include both of us, crying from fear. The recording contained only the shout. Enough, Noah. Get back here. Then it jumped to another moment. My voice said, What? Another cut. Can you repeat that? Another cut. Say it again. The 3 clips had been placed together. My bad hearing sounded like a mind becoming confused. The atmosphere in the courtroom changed. I felt it, without turning around. The woman on the back bench crossed her arms. The reporter underlined something twice. Judge Harmon showed no emotion, but her pen continued moving. I knew the truth behind every sentence. But who in that room would believe an old man over a recording of his own voice? Marissa stopped the audio. Then she sat back. For 1 second, she looked at me. A tiny smile touched the corner of her mouth. That was when I realized something she had missed. She had ended the clip too early. The recording stopped immediately after the part she wanted, but I remembered that afternoon. The shout about Noah came from the driveway incident. I was certain. Then another memory returned. Marissa had arrived shortly afterward while I was still holding Noah. She had spoken. I could almost hear the words. And her phone had been in her hand. If the device captured my shout, then it might have captured everything after it. The truck. The moment I reached Noah. The reason I shouted. Marissa arriving. Her own voice. The complete file could contain the truth. But the full recording did not belong to me. It belonged to her. She had presented only the section she had carved out. The rest remained somewhere inside the original file. I leaned toward Gwen and whispered. She cut it. Gwen looked at me. There's more, I continued. That was the driveway incident. The delivery truck. Everything happened after the part she played. Are you certain? I would stake everything on it. She arrived that afternoon. Her voice may be there too. Gwen leaned back slowly. I watched an idea form behind her eyes. She did not smile, but something settled inside her. The way a carpenter's level settles when it finds a true line. I don't have the recording, I whispered. She does. How can we make her play the rest? Gwen reached for her legal pad. We don't make her, she said quietly. We let the rules do it. Then she stood. Your Honor, before we continue, the defense has an objection. Gwen rested one hand on the table. The recording the court just heard was edited. The file jumps between unrelated moments. It has been cut and rearranged. Marissa's attorney stood. Your Honor, the recording speaks for itself. That is precisely the problem, Gwen answered. It is not a complete recording. It is a collection of selected pieces. She faced Judge Harmon. If the petitioner intends to use audio as evidence, the recording must be authenticated as a fair and accurate representation of what occurred. A collection of chosen moments is not the complete event. Judge Harmon looked toward the other attorney. Counsel, is this an edited file? He hesitated. Then he glanced toward Marissa. It is a compilation of relevant portions, Your Honor. Relevant according to whom? Gwen asked. She turned back toward the judge. We request production of every original recording in its complete, unedited form. Every file should be played from beginning to end. The courtroom became quiet. Even the reporter stopped writing. Your Honor, Marissa's attorney began, the complete files include substantial material unrelated to this case. Then hearing them should not damage your argument, Gwen replied. If the recordings are honest representations, the complete versions will support them. I watched Marissa. For the first time that morning, something appeared on her face that was neither grief nor concern. Fear. She leaned toward her attorney and whispered quickly. One hand covered her mouth. He whispered back. She responded again, more urgently. Judge Harmon watched over the top of her glasses. Counsel, she said, speak with your client briefly or provide the original files. Those are the available choices. Marissa's attorney adjusted his tie. Marissa had turned pale. At that moment, I did not know exactly what frightened her. I only understood that something existed on those recordings that she never wanted the courtroom to hear. Judge Harmon placed her pen on the bench. This is how we will proceed, she said. Her tone remained calm, but every person in the room listened. I will not accept an edited collection as proof of anyone's character. If Miss Keller wants this court to consider her recordings, I will consider them in their entirety. She looked directly at Marissa. Miss Keller, do you possess the original files? Marissa opened her mouth, then closed it. They may have been deleted, Your Honor. I only kept the sections that supported your argument? Judge Harmon finished. Marissa said nothing. The judge allowed the silence to remain. That creates a problem for your position, she said. Not for Mr. Keller's. The reporter's pen began moving again. Then, something happened that Marissa clearly did not expect. Her own attorney cleared his throat. Your Honor, he said, and reluctance filled every word. In the interest of complete disclosure, my office received the source files while preparing the evidence. We retain the original recordings. He raised a small silver flash drive between two fingers. I turned toward Marissa. Every trace of color disappeared from her face. She stared at the drive as though it contained something alive. You still have those? She whispered. She was not speaking to the judge. Her hand tightened around her attorney's sleeve. I thought we agreed. Miss Keller, Judge Harmon said. Her voice cut through the room. Your counsel has produced the original material. The court will hear it. Marissa looked at me. Her expression was frightened and trapped. In that moment, I understood. She had entered the courtroom, convinced that she would win. Now she realized she might have provided the very evidence that would expose the truth. The clerk accepted the flash drive. She connected it to a laptop linked with the courtroom speakers. The process lasted less than a minute. It felt much longer. Marissa's attorney tried one final objection. Your Honor, I renew the concern regarding relevance. These files are lengthy, and much of the content. Overruled, Judge Harmon said without looking up. You introduced the recordings, counsel. The court will hear the recordings. Marissa sat rigidly. Her hands rested flat against the table. They looked exactly like mine had earlier. We had become reflections of each other, both waiting for the same audio, but for completely different reasons. I did not know exactly what remained on the recording. I remembered the driveway. I believed the complete file would explain my shouting, but original files could still be incomplete. What if Marissa had stopped recording before the important part? What if my memory was wrong? My heart struck hard against my chest. I forced myself to breathe. I felt Daniel's tie against my collar. I thought about Lily's wooden box sitting on my workbench. Her name remained carved across the lid. Gwen leaned toward me. Whatever happens, she whispered, remain still. Let the recording speak for you. Do not interrupt. I nodded. The clerk opened a folder. A long list of recordings appeared, each marked with dates spanning nearly 2 months. Judge Harmon reviewed a note Gwen had provided. The afternoon in question, she instructed. Begin at the start of the original file and play it without interruption. The clerk clicked. A soft hiss came through the speakers. Then outdoor sounds. A bird. Wind moving faintly across the microphone. Finally, the low sound of an engine. A truck reversing. Every person in the room leaned forward. The engine became louder. Then Noah's small voice appeared. He shouted something about a puddle. His shoes slapped against the pavement. Running. Moving toward the truck. Then my voice filled the room. The same voice Marissa had played earlier. Enough, Noah. Get back here. But this time, everyone understood it. It was not anger. It was fear. It was the voice of someone watching a child move toward immediate danger. The recording captured my footsteps. The heavy sound of my knees striking the driveway. The truck's brakes. Then my voice again. Quiet. Shaking. Close to the microphone. You cannot run toward vehicles, buddy. You frightened me. Noah cried. I heard myself crying with him. I have you, I said. You're all right. I have you. The courtroom became completely silent. The shout that had sounded cruel 10 minutes earlier now sounded exactly like what it was. A grandfather trying to reach a child before a moving truck did. I had not abandoned Noah in danger. I had pulled him away from it. The woman on the back bench slowly uncrossed her arms. The young reporter stopped writing and listened. Judge Harmon remained composed, but something changed behind her eyes. Gwen released a slow breath. Marissa stared at the speaker as though she could stop the audio by concentrating hard enough. For the first time that day, I felt the room move toward the truth. Warmth spread through my chest. I thought the case had changed. I thought that was the important moment, but the recording continued. Another 90 seconds remained. I watched Marissa's face. Then I saw her, remember. Her eyes widened. She understood exactly what came next. She started to rise. Your Honor, that explains the incident. The recording can stop now. Sit down, Miss Keller, Judge Harmon said quietly. The audio continued. On the recording, a vehicle entered the driveway. A door closed. Marissa's voice appeared. Light. Casual. Completely unaware that the conversation would one day matter. Sorry I'm late, she said. Noah, sweetheart, get your shoes. Then her voice became quieter. She laughed under her breath. I cannot wait until all of this is finished. She had not stopped recording. Perhaps the phone remained inside her pocket or bag. The microphone continued capturing sound as she walked back toward her vehicle. Then another voice came through faintly. Roar, you still there? He asked through the phone speaker. Yeah, Marissa answered. I'm getting the children. Then she lowered her voice. She believed no one else could hear. I'm almost finished. I only need enough evidence against the old man. Then we're clear to move. Once he's out of the picture, no one will be watching. Roar said something too faint to understand. Then Marissa answered. Her words came through clearly. Relax. Noah is fine. He stays home alone all the time when I have a shift. He knows not to open the door. No one is ever going to find out. The entire courtroom seemed to inhale at once. The woman behind me covered her mouth. The young reporter wrote so quickly that his pen skipped across the page. I did not move. Those were Marissa's words. Her voice, her recording, the same evidence she had created and brought into court. No one could claim it had been invented. No one could say it belonged to someone else. Her own attorney had authenticated the complete files while sitting beside her. She had created the evidence, selected pieces from it, and handed it to the judge. Now the complete truth had finished speaking. Judge Harmon slowly removed her reading glasses. She looked at Marissa. She did not say anything. The recording faded into silence. Marissa stood. That isn't... Her voice broke. It's out of context. I was exhausted. People say things when they're tired. Miss Keller, Judge Harmon said. He was going to take my children. I had to protect. Miss Keller, sit down. Marissa sat. The careful image she had maintained all morning disappeared. Her attorney moved his chair slightly farther away. I watched Marissa struggle to control her breathing. The strangest thing was that I did not feel victorious. I felt grief, because suddenly I could see the entire situation. Marissa was a young woman who lost her husband too soon. She worked shifts she could not afford to miss. She struggled to manage 2 children and a household. She had been leaving Noah alone because she believed she had no other choice. Instead of asking me for help, she decided the safest solution was to remove the one person most likely to notice. Me. She feared being discovered so deeply that she built the exact case that exposed her. Her tears were real now, not tears prepared for a judge. They seemed to be tears for herself and for everything that had happened since Daniel's loss. I leaned toward her. Quietly enough that only Marissa and the people nearest our tables could hear, I said the words I had wanted to tell her for 2 years. You do not have to handle everything alone, Marissa. You never did. She looked at me. Her expression changed. For a moment, she seemed surprised that kindness was still available. Judge Harmon tapped the gavel once. The sound divided the room. We will take a 10-minute recess, she announced. Miss Keller, I strongly recommend that you speak with your counsel. The judge left the bench. People began moving. I found Marissa in the hallway near a water fountain. She stood alone beside the concrete wall. Her attorney was farther down the hall, speaking on his phone. When Marissa saw me approaching, her body became tense. She pressed her back against the wall as though preparing for another argument. Did you come to celebrate? She asked. Her mascara had run. For a moment, she looked much younger. No, I said. I came to speak about Daniel. That stopped her. Daniel would be heartbroken by this, I said. My voice was not cruel. It was simply honest. Not because you filed the case. Because you believed you were alone and never came to me. Her chin trembled. You were going to take them from me. I never wanted to take your children. I kept my voice level, exactly as I had promised. I wanted Tuesday. I wanted Thursday. I wanted to teach Noah how to use a hammer. I wanted to let Lily sandwood until her arms became tired. That was all. It was always all. I didn't know how to. She stopped. One hand covered her mouth. Those children need their mother, I said. And they need me. It was never meant to be one or the other. I took a slow breath. I am not trying to remove them from your life, Marissa. I am trying to make sure they do not lose me too. She turned toward the wall, but she did not argue. For the first time in 2 years, she did not push me away. A door opened farther down the hallway. The bailiff appeared. They are ready, he announced. Marissa wiped her face with both hands. She straightened her gray dress. Before we returned to the courtroom, she looked at me. Really looked at me. Then she gave the smallest nod. It was not forgiveness. It was not a truce, but it was a crack in the wall. We entered the courtroom together. Judge Harmon returned to the bench. Everyone became quiet. The people who had looked at me with pity earlier now watched me differently. Perhaps it was respect. Perhaps embarrassment because they had believed the edited version so quickly. Judge Harmon folded her hands. "I have reviewed the recordings," she said. "All of them, which is more than the petitioner originally intended this court to hear." She allowed the meeting to settle. "Miss Keller, you asked this court to declare Mr. Keller a danger to your children. You submitted audio evidence. When played in full, that same evidence shows a grandfather pulling a child away from a moving vehicle." Marissa stared down at the table. "The recording also reveals something far more concerning," Judge Harmon continued. "It contains a parent admitting that a young child was repeatedly left home without adult supervision." The judge paused. "I want to be clear. I am not without compassion. Grief, financial pressure, and hardship can cause otherwise responsible people to make poor decisions. However, this court must consider the safety and stability of the children. I will not accept an intentionally incomplete account." Then she turned toward me. Her voice softened slightly. "Mr. Keller, you endured serious accusations today. You listened while your words were rearranged. You remained calm and did not raise your voice. That tells this court something no edited recording could demonstrate." My throat tightened. I nodded because I did not trust myself to speak. Behind me, I heard the young reporter quietly say something while continuing to write. The woman on the back bench nodded. The entire room had changed. Not because I fought louder, because the truth had finally been allowed to finish its sentence. Judge Harmon picked up her pen. "I am prepared to rule." Then she said 3 words I will remember for the rest of my life. "Petition is denied." 3 words. That was all it took to return Tuesdays and Thursdays to me. The judge continued, but for a moment, her voice seemed distant. She denied the request to declare me unfit. She denied the request to move Lily and Noah out of state, at least until a complete welfare review could be conducted. Then she ordered something I had been afraid to ask for. "The court recognizes a substantial and beneficial relationship between these children and their grandfather," Judge Harmon said. "Mr. Keller is granted formal visitation on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and alternating weekends, effective immediately." Tuesdays, Thursdays, the exact days I had lost. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "because of the statement regarding a child being left without adult supervision, the court will order a child welfare evaluation of the home." She looked between Marissa and me. "This court's only priority is the well-being of Lily and Noah." Then she added, "A courtroom exists to discover the truth. It should not be used as a tool for destroying one another. I hope both of you remember that for the sake of these children." She brought down the gavel. "We are adjourned." The room immediately filled with movement. Chairs scraped against the floor. People spoke in low voices. The young reporter was already heading toward the door. Gwen placed one hand on my shoulder and smiled for the first time that day. "You did it," she said. "You did it," I answered. "You remain still," she replied. "Sometimes that is the entire job." I looked toward Marissa. She gathered her belongings slowly. Her attorney had already left. She looked exhausted and empty. At the time, I believed that was the most important moment of my life. Sitting in a courtroom while my Tuesdays and Thursdays were returned. I was wrong. The most important moment happened 3 days later. I drove into Marissa's driveway for my first Tuesday visit. I remained inside my truck for nearly a minute. A court could create a schedule. It could not force a door to feel welcoming. It could not order someone's heart to open. Then the front door flew open. Lily ran down the steps. "Grandpa." She reached me so quickly that she nearly knocked me backward. Her arms wrapped around my waist. Her face pressed against my shirt. Then I noticed she was carrying something. She stepped back and raised it between us. The wooden box. Her box. The one I had completed the night before Marissa changed the locks. The box that had remained on my workbench for months. "Mom gave it to me," Lily said, almost out of breath. "She told me you made it. She said you wanted me to have it." I looked toward the house. Marissa stood in the doorway with her arms wrapped around herself. Perhaps she had taken the box from me that final day. Perhaps Gwen found a way to deliver it later. I never learned. It did not matter. Noah appeared next. He walked slowly. He seemed uncertain whether he was allowed to be excited. Then he saw me. His hesitation disappeared. He ran across the yard and wrapped both arms around my leg. "Hello, buddy," I said. My voice broke. Marissa remained on the porch. She did not walk toward us, but she did not close the door. When our eyes met, she gave the same small nod I had seen in the courthouse hallway. I knelt in the driveway, the same driveway captured on the recording. I placed one arm around Lily and the other around Noah. "I knew you would come back," Lily whispered. Then she asked, "You promised, Dad, didn't you?" I held both children tighter. At that moment, I understood. The promise I had made to Daniel inside the hospital had finally been kept. Life does not end neatly the way stories do. But several things became more stable during the weeks that followed. The visitation schedule remained. Tuesdays, Thursdays, alternating weekends, exactly as the judge ordered. I placed a small calendar on my refrigerator and marked each visit with a pencil X. Ruth had always done that. I finally understood why. The welfare evaluation began and ended. Lily and Noah were doing well. In fact, they seemed happier once they had reliable time with both Marissa and me. The evaluator noted that the home needed stronger routines, fewer unexpected changes, and more consistent support. To Marissa's credit, she listened. She took the recommendations seriously. The plan to move 2 states away disappeared. Marissa never submitted another request. Roar did not remain either. Once the situation became difficult, he left within a month. A person who encourages someone to abandon their late husband's family may not remain when responsibility becomes inconvenient. I did not miss him. Marissa faced consequences too. The local newspaper published a short article. The reporter wrote carefully and fairly, but people still read it. Some of Marissa's friends stopped calling. That was a real loss. I took no pleasure in it. Marissa and I did not suddenly become close. A wall remained between us. But the wall was thinner. Most of our conversations concerned pickup times, school papers, medical appointments, and schedules. We stayed polite, careful, distant. Still, both of us showed up. Both followed the schedule. Both tried, in our own bruised ways, to place Lily and Noah first. I told myself that was enough. I had regained what I fought for. I had no right to demand more. Then, one Thursday evening, my phone rang. Marissa was calling. What she asked had nothing to do with a court order or an attorney. It was the last thing I expected. Tal, she said after a pause. It's Marissa. I know. Is everything all right? Yes. No. She released a long breath. I was called in for a double shift tomorrow. Someone resigned, and I don't have anyone to watch Noah after school. Another pause followed. I know tomorrow isn't one of your days. I understood how difficult it was for her to ask. This was the woman who changed the locks. The woman who described me as unsafe before a judge. Now she was calling voluntarily and asking me to care for her son. I did not make her explain herself. Family should not have to earn help after asking honestly. What time do you need me? I asked. Something caught in her throat. 3:15. School ends at 3. I'll be there at 3:05. Tal. She stopped. Then she spoke so quietly that my bad ear almost missed it. Thank you. 2 words. I had waited 2 years to hear them. You don't need to thank me, I said. They are Daniel's children. That makes them mine too. And it makes you family, whether either of us likes it. She laughed. It was a wet, surprised laugh. The first laugh I had heard from her since before the funeral. The following afternoon, I picked up Noah at 3:05, exactly as promised. We went to my workshop and built a birdhouse. He sanded one section so hard that he almost wore a hole through the back. Just like Daniel had done 30 years earlier, the old birdhouse still rested on a shelf. Its hole remained untouched. I did not tell Noah. Some moments return quietly. You do not always need to explain them. Sometimes you simply watch. Marissa arrived at 7 to collect him. Then she stayed for coffee. She stayed for coffee. That was when I realized the ice had truly begun to melt. I have had plenty of time to think about everything that happened. An old carpenter spends long hours in a workshop listening to a hand plane move across pine. I keep returning to one conclusion. I did not succeed in court because I proved Marissa was a bad person. I never tried to do that. I did not search for personal secrets. I did not record her in return. I did not play the same game. I asked for one thing. Let the truth finish. Play the entire recording. Do not stop at the most convenient moment. Listen until the end. That was all. People believe they must shout to be heard. They believe they must respond twice as forcefully when someone hurts them. But I have lived 68 years. I have lost my wife and my son, and I learned that the loudest person in a room is rarely the person carrying the clearest truth. I set a boundary that day, a quiet one. I would always show up for Lily and Noah, every Tuesday, every Thursday, rain or sunshine, court order or no court order. But I would never again beg someone to permit me to exist in their lives. I would not reduce myself to fit another person's smaller version of me. Kindness and firmness can exist together. Forgiveness does not require giving someone permission to erase you. Those ideas are not opposites. It took a courtroom for me to understand. Lily still keeps the wooden box. There is one detail about the courtroom recording that I never discussed with anyone. One final sound. After Marissa stopped speaking, and all the damaging words had already been captured, the recording continued for one more second. In the distance, from somewhere inside the house, Noah's voice could be heard. Is Grandpa coming Tuesday? That was the final thing on the recording. A small boy asking whether his grandfather would return. No one in the courtroom mentioned it. Perhaps they did not notice. But I heard it. I carried those words with me from that day forward. Because that question was the reason I fought. Not because I wanted to win. Not because I needed everyone to admit I was right. I only wanted the answer to one question. When a 6-year-old boy asks whether his grandfather is coming Tuesday, I want the answer to be yes. It is Thursday as I tell this story. Late afternoon sunlight enters through the workshop window. The light turns gold as it catches the sawdust floating in the air. Noah stands beside me at the workbench. He is learning how to use a hand plane. His tongue sticks slightly from the corner of his mouth while he concentrates. Lily works nearby, carving her name into a fresh piece of pine. She is on her 3rd attempt. She wants the letter L to be exactly right. Her wooden box sits beside her. It no longer holds small toys. Inside is a photograph. Daniel at 9 years old. He is holding a birdhouse with a hole sanded through the back. He is smiling with one tooth missing. Marissa is here too. This time, she did not remain in the doorway. She entered. She sits on Ruth's old stool beside the window. A mug of coffee grows cold between her hands while she watches her children make a mess inside their grandfather's workshop. 3 generations share one room. The air smells like fresh cut wood. I look across the bench. Then I say the words quietly. Only to myself. Only to Daniel. Son, I watched over your children, exactly as I promised. The lesson I carried from that courtroom is simple. You do not have to be the loudest person to be believed. Sometimes you only need enough patience to remain calm and say, please listen until the end.